Good morning again. This is Pete Spackman. I pray the Lord's blessing on you today. It's a great day to be alive, and it's a great day to lift up the name of the Lord. I want to read from Luke chapter 22:31, a verse you're really familiar with. It says this, "And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not." That's an amazing verse. Over the last 4 to 5 weeks, I've talked nothing about the work that God did through us in the prisons of Alabama. And I could probably spend the rest of my days just talking about the days on this telecast, on this video talking about the things that God did. The testimonies are probably by the hundreds, and I remember lots and lots of them. But I always testify to the glory of God and what God has done. And how God has preserved us, as shared in one of the previous testimonies, is how I was set up with drugs and it looked really bad, but God had gone before us. I want to tell you this morning, if God be for us, who can be against us? If your heart's right with God, everything's going to be all right. I always say, I have a saying, if you think right, you'll do right, and everything will be all right. That's the way it is. In the early 90s, we had a couple of guys named Ronnie and a guy called Billy. We'll just call him Billy. And that stayed with us a little while. And the thing with Billy is, one day he was leaving prison. He's only a young man. He was leaving the prison. And I was there to pick up another guy. He was being discharged from the prison, and there was another guy, and they called him Fat and Nasty, the other guy. And he'd asked me the previous night for a lift or for a ride to a halfway house in Tallahassee. And I'd said, okay. So when they arrived at the prison that morning about 8 o'clock, this young Billy's with him also, and I didn't know he was being released at the same time as Fat and Nasty. By the way, Fat and Nasty was a saved man. I don't know him by any other name. But anyway, I took Billy and Fat and Nasty to this halfway house. And when they got there was beer cans and cigarette butts all over the place. And Billy just went inside, and he come out about 5 minutes later, and he said, "What's it like?" I said, "What's it like, son?" He said, it'll do, it's a mess. And I said to him, right off the top of my head, I've never done this before, ever, since I've been in prison ministry. I just said to him, look, man, I've got a place. I've got a couple of guys already staying, but we have real rules. Now, you don't have to come, but if you want to, this is the way I expect you to live. And I'd give them details. Be home at 10 o'clock at night. Don't stay home. Don't stay later than 10 o'clock. No drinking, no women, and all them things. And that he must come to church with us. And he agreed to all that. He said, but let me look at the place. So I brought him to the place. We had a trailer on the yard. It was a brand new one that had been bought for us by Adullam Ministries. And so I took Billy to the place. I showed him, and he was obviously delighted. There was a whole lot different from the place he was going to stay. And the thing is, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even pray about that. No, it was a crazy thing. But God has got our back. I promise you that. So I brought him in, and he was staying with another guy named Ronnie. And Ronnie is doing excellently well, even today, many years later. But anyway, after a couple of weeks, Billy came home late one night. And by this time, my daughters who were young, in the early teens, 15, 16, really, he was such a affable character, always good-looking boy, probably in his early, about 24, 25, full of fun. And my girls really liked him, particularly Naomi, not in any other way, but just as a friend. He's a great friend. She was already dating a young guy who she's now married to. But anyway, the young fellow was very popular. But he come home one night really late, and he'd obviously been drinking. And I said to him, Billy, that was the deal. You come, there's no drinking on this and on that. And he said, he apologized. And I said, okay, if it happens again, you just have to leave. I'm not going to take a chance. So he agreed with that. And a couple of weeks later, he did the same again. He didn't come in that night at all. So the next morning, I went over to his trailer to see if he was there. And he wasn't. He wasn't there. But so I looked around and I found some magazines, girly magazines, that were really rough. And I made up my mind, and he's got to go the moment he comes in. And so about an hour or so later, he shows up, and he got involved. What he'd done, he got involved with a prison officer in the prisons, and he'd been out drinking with him. And this is by now a couple of months, maybe about 6 or 7 weeks after his release. So I said, you have to go. Well, the next thing I know about him, he'd stolen some property from the officer, and he went to prison for a year. And one day I'm riding my car, and I got a call from Naomi and Josh. And they said, we're going to, Dad, I'm going to pick Billy up with Josh. And I said, because I never told him why I asked him to leave. I just told him, just trust your dad. And they did. So a year after that, they got a call, and it was, can you come and pick me up? He's been released in Birmingham. And so she sets off, and I said, she called me and she said, we're on our way. And I said, I said, give me Josh. I said, Josh, do me a favor, son. You want to marry my daughter? You turn around now. Don't take it. Don't go out there, man. Just said, no explanation. Just trust me, son. Just don't go out there. And so they come back, and she was really obviously upset that she'd have to leave him there. And so that was it. But one day, and she was, she wasn't mad at me, but she was wondering why I did what I did. But one day, God's protection is great. We don't know why things happen the way they do, but I want to tell you, God has a rear guard. God watches us all the time. I had, when young Billy and Ronnie were staying there, I had 4 young girls and staying with me, and my wife, of course. And, it's a big thing, that. There's a lot of faith involved in that. And we were sitting, and of course, Naomi had got real close to him over that time, and I often wondered where he was. But after that phone call, we didn't hear from him. And then one day, we were watching the TV, and it was it was the news, and a young lady had took a young man into her home, and her husband, and the 2 children, and he killed them, except for the father. He butchered them, 2 children and the wife. And they said they were looking for him, and of course the next day they've caught him, and he pleaded guilty, I believe it was. And because he was bloodstained, he was messed up. It was a terrible crime. And when I thought about it at that moment, I thought, oh my God, what a fool. I'd never really checked him out, and I knew him pretty well. But not as a Christian brother. My heart reached out in sympathy, and it was a bad move. But God had my back. And then, of course, he got the death penalty. And that was in the 90s, and he's still on death row now in prison. And I want to tell you something. My daughter wrote to him and told him the way of salvation. He never ever wrote back and told her that he committed his life to the Lord. But not long after that, when some people wanted to do an interview, they were saying he'd been, hadn't had the right trial, that during the trial there's some mess up. And they asked me, what did I think about him? And I just said, well, I loved him. And my daughter still communicates with him now and again. I said, but I believe he deserves what he got. He deserves to die for that horrible crime. Not that he can't be saved, because I believe that he can be really born again with the Spirit of God. But I believe he had to be sentenced to death for that. That's my own personal thoughts. But my heart is glad that God had my back. Now I want to tell you, through the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be sharing a whole lot more how we had to move back to England, and then when we come back, got back involved with the prisons, and then got involved in the prisons of Russia, in South America, and then we began our work with the children's home. In our children's home, we still have over 30 children. Only some of them are grown up now. Alex is the fireman, he's 21. We've had him since a day old. Colton is 23, and he works for a good company. He's married and doing well. And one of my daughters is at Bible college, and everything seems to be going good. But I'm glad that God watches our back. If God be for us, who can be against us? I'll talk a little bit more. May the Lord bless you tomorrow, and have an incredible day. May the blessings of God shine upon you. Thank you. Amen.